Few who enter this forest realize how many never return. Morning fog drifts low across the valley floor of Olympic National Park, a white current that slides between the fir trunks and settles over the riverbeds. The sound of water is constant here, soft and cold, and the silence that follows each ripple feels older than memory itself. Trails cut through the greenery in gentle arcs, but distance in this place is deceptive. Steps vanish into moss, and radio signals fade without warning. Every season brings its share of rescues and recoveries, but some names, logged once in ranger notebooks, never receive a final entry. This file concerns 9 such cases spread across 3 decades and across 3 distant regions of the United States. Each was documented, mapped, and searched in full compliance with standard protocol. None produced closure. Field log entry at 7:12 a.m., temperature 41 degrees Fahrenheit, visibility low, sound level minimal. The first sequence of incidents occurred within the Olympic and Cascades corridor of Washington state between 1996 and 2009. All 3 involved trained personnel, individuals accustomed to wilderness travel. Each disappearance took place in clear weather, within mapped areas, and under standard duty conditions. In early August 1996, 29-year-old Ranger Thomas Eberly departed the Hoh River Station to inspect bridge damage reported after seasonal flooding. The patrol assignment required a single day, covering 8 miles of river trail and returning before sunset. Eberly was regarded by his colleagues as efficient, cautious, and physically resilient. He had completed winter survival training and was familiar with radio procedure. At 800 hours, he signed out a standard equipment kit including a first aid pouch, portable radio, emergency beacon, and a field notebook marked with Map Record 3. He left the station on foot. Weather data from that morning recorded light wind, no precipitation, and stable barometric pressure. By mid-afternoon, hikers along the Hoh Trail noted seeing a uniformed ranger crossing a narrow footbridge near Mineral Creek. He appeared to be recording something in his notebook and acknowledged their greeting with a wave. At 16:30, when he had not checked in by radio, the base initiated a contact attempt. No reply was received. The first search patrol reached the area at 1900 hours. The bridge was intact, the planks still damp from humidity, but there was no sign of Eberly. His radio call sign remained silent across both frequencies. Search operations began at first light the next morning. 2 teams advanced along the riverbank, marking coordinates every quarter mile. Dog units detected a faint trail along the gravel bars, leading downstream for approximately 2 miles before abruptly stopping near a cluster of cedar roots protruding from the bank. There, the dogs circled repeatedly, then sat down, refusing to proceed. Breathing pause. Mist thickened over the water. The air carried a taste of iron and wood. At the base of the cedar roots, rescuers found Eberly's field notebook, partially soaked yet legible. The last written line read, "Bridge secure, moving north sector 2." Beneath the entry was a small dark smear, later confirmed to be ink diluted by moisture, not blood. His radio, pack, and beacon were missing. Divers from the state rescue unit searched the adjacent water for 2 days. The current was shallow, no deeper than 3 feet in most sections, yet visibility was almost zero due to silt. Nothing surfaced. On the 3rd day, aerial reconnaissance scanned 6 miles of river corridor with infrared imaging. No heat signatures resembling human presence were detected. The incident report from August 10th lists final notation. Subject presumed missing in action. No recovery. Case remains active. Field log entry at 11:42 a.m. Wind southeast 9 miles per hour. Humidity 91%. Search suspended due to fatigue. Weeks later, a park volunteer clearing storm debris discovered an object wedged under a log near the confluence with the Clearwater tributary. It was the missing radio. The casing showed no cracks, the battery intact, yet the channel dial was turned fully to off. The recovery site lay nearly 7 miles downstream from Eberly's recorded position. The terrain between those points was rough, but passable. No footprints or drag marks connected them. Officials concluded that the radio may have been carried by floodwater, though rainfall records indicated no flood event during that period. Colleagues described the disappearance as unlike any previous incident in the park's logbook. An experienced ranger, familiar terrain, daylight conditions, full gear, no distress signal. Beyond the note, no trace. Field summary closed with standard phrase. Search concluded, subject unlocated. Silence returned to the valley. The forest along the Ho River absorbs sound easily. Even distant helicopter rotors fade before reaching the treetops. By the end of the month, new growth had covered the search tracks, and the area returned to its usual state, still green and indifferent. That was the last recorded reference to Ranger Thomas Eberly in Olympic archives. Fog moved in again from the sea, erasing the trail markers one by one. Late in September 2001, another ranger vanished within the same regional range, this time near Mount Baker National Forest, 70 miles northeast of Eberly's last known patrol. The case file lists the subject as 34-year-old Deputy Ranger Claire Morton, assigned to survey firebreak lines and report fallen timber along an access road known as Glacier Route. Her vehicle, a park-issued pickup, was logged departing base at 6:45 a.m. She carried a radio set, standard field kit, and a clipboard containing maintenance maps. According to the duty roster, her inspection should have lasted until early afternoon. The last radio message, transmitted at 9:32, was brief and routine. Reach junction, moving toward East Ridge, she said. No irregularities, no weather alerts. After that, silence. At 3 p.m., a snowplow driver traveling the same route found the ranger's truck parked at a turnout. The engine was idling, headlights on, driver's door locked. The interior was orderly. Clipboard and maps were on the passenger seat, the radio in its cradle. When officers arrived, they noted that the key was still in the ignition, fuel at half tank, and heater set to medium. Outside the vehicle, faint boot prints led away toward the forest edge for about 30 yards, before vanishing on rocky ground. The direction faced a slope descending to Glacier Creek. The soil was damp but not muddy, and no secondary prints or scuff marks were visible. A field search commenced that evening with a team of 6, using headlamps and calling her name across the ravine. The terrain was steep yet open, visibility good. No response came. At dawn, a helicopter conducted a sweep along the creek. From above, the only visible disturbance was the glint of the truck's roof in morning light. Field log entry at 7:51 a.m., temperature 39 degrees Fahrenheit, wind calm, search pattern Delta Formation initiated. During the next 48 hours, over 40 personnel covered nearly 12 square miles. Dogs picked up Morton's scent briefly at the slope base, then lost it near a rock wall. Rescuers found a single glove, standard issue, dark green, intact, resting on a flat stone. It bore no soil traces, as though placed rather than dropped. Breathing paragraph. The forest was silent, except for snowmelt dripping from branches. The air felt dense, colorless, absorbing every call. On the third day, weather deteriorated. Fog moved in from the valley, reducing visibility to less than 20 feet. Operations paused for safety. When they resumed, the glove was gone. Photographs confirmed its prior existence, but no one could locate it again. Whether it had been displaced by wind, animal, or human action remained unclear. After 7 days, Search Command recommended transition to passive monitoring. The report from October 3rd states, all logical routes exhausted, no physical evidence of fall or struggle, probable voluntary departure unsubstantiated. The truck was towed from the site and later decommissioned. Colleagues at Mount Baker Station kept her logbook on the desk for months, hoping for renewed contact. None came. Field note, 1 month later. Local hikers reported hearing repeated radio static in that sector, resembling an open channel with intermittent clicks. Signal trace led nowhere. The park's communication tower did not register transmissions at those times. The Morton file remains one of only 2 ranger disappearances recorded in that district since 1970. Breathing pause. Snow closed the ridge by early winter, sealing off all tracks beneath a white crust. The third case in the northwestern sequence took place in June 2009 near North Cascades National Park, an area known for narrow gorges and unstable weather fronts. The missing man, 51-year-old fire technician Peter Lann, was supervising a controlled burn in the Stehekin Valley when contact ceased. He was last seen walking the perimeter to check containment lines before nightfall. At 8:20 p.m., his team radioed him for a status update. No reply. His last known position, marked by a GPS coordinate on map record 12, lay near a stand of ponderosa pine within sight of camp lights. By 10 p.m., after repeated calls, 2 crew members went to look for him. They found his helmet and radio placed neatly beside a fire break, both clean, unscorched, and dry. There were no footprints leading away, only charred soil cooling in the night air. The next morning, search crews expanded outward from the site. Thermal drones detected no human signatures. Helicopter infrared scans showed residual ground heat from the controlled burn, but no isolated warm objects. Field log entry at 9:58 a.m., barometer steady, temperature 68 degrees Fahrenheit, visual range clear to 5 miles. Later that afternoon, a hose crew found Lann's wristwatch lying in an ash pit, still running. The time displayed 9:23, matching the estimated window of disappearance. The watch face was unmarked, glass intact. Investigators documented it, sealed it in evidence packaging, and noted no sign of melting or soot. The surrounding soil was sifted, revealing no footprints, fibers, or human remains. Weather remained stable, no wind strong enough to disperse trace evidence. By the end of the week, Incident Command concluded that all practical recovery measures had been taken. The final line of the report read, "Area cooled, search negative, technician presumed missing in duty sector, case open for periodic review." As with the previous files, no definitive cause was entered. When summer ended, rainfall erased the last scorched boundaries. The Stehekin Valley returned to its usual pattern of mist and birdsong. 3 names entered the Northwestern Register of Unresolved Ranger Disappearances. None have been amended since. Field log closure. Visibility moderate, sound minimal, subject unlocated. The second regional cluster begins farther south, across the sandstone canyons and open mesas of Utah and Arizona, a region where sound travels slowly and distances blur in heat haze. Between 2010 and 2019, 3 civilians disappeared while hiking in separate national park zones under conditions that remain unaccounted for. Few incidents in that decade drew as much attention among field officers as the disappearance of geologist Robert Hale, age 47, in Capitol Reef National Park. The event occurred in late April 2010 during a period of mild temperatures and clear skies. Hale had arrived from Denver for a solo geological survey. His permit indicated a 3-day stay, covering a loop route along Cohab Canyon and back through the Fremont River corridor. The park issued him a GPS unit, a satellite communicator, and a paper map. His equipment log also listed 2 liters of water, a camera, and a small sample hammer. Rangers saw him depart at 7:15 a.m. on April 26th. He signed the trail register with precise handwriting. The following morning, his vehicle remained parked at the trailhead, untouched. By midday, the oversight unit noted that his communicator had not transmitted any scheduled check-in message. A field search began immediately. Initial teams followed his intended route. Midway through Cohab Canyon, they located a small rock cairn, recently built, with Hale's name carved on a flat stone. The inscription read, "Survey Complete Section 1." Beside it lay a camera bag containing a single used memory card. The camera itself was missing. Breathing paragraph. The canyon held still air, no wind movement, only the clicking of pebbles as they cooled in the shade. When the images were reviewed later at base, the final photograph showed an outcrop of sandstone with distinctive mineral bands. The next shot was blank gray, as if the shutter had been pressed inside darkndarkness. Metadata placed the time at 16:42 and April 26th. Search teams found faint movement leading to the red dry area and vanishing in smoke. Logs brought from Wayne County tracked a partial set several hundred yards before losing it near a narrow fishery rock. The fissure extended about 10 feet deep, too small for them. Field log entry at 19:20. Air temperature 63 degrees Fahrenheit. Light fluid. No oxygen. Over the next 3 days, ground crews, drones, infrared surveys covered nearly 40 square miles. No signs of camp, float, or remains were found. The communicator device never transmitted again. Its signal beam remained silent despite repeated claims. On the 4th day, a local guide noticed a reflection on a cliff face north of the original search area. Climbers reached the spot and discovered Hale's camera wedged between 2 rocks 40 feet above ground. It was intact, lens unbroken, power switch off. The rope or ladder needed to place it there was never located. Investigators retrieved the camera and compared serial data to the memory card. The timestamps matched, confirming authenticity. The official note filed May 2nd reads, "Object recovered. Placement inconsistent with terrain access. Subject not located." Breathing paragraph. Sunlight faded behind the red cliffs, leaving the landscape colorless, soundless. The Hale case remains open in Capitol Reef archives. Later that same year, in October 2010, 33-year-old photographer Dana Ruiz vanished in Canyon de Chelly, northeastern Arizona, while documenting petroglyph sites under a cultural research permit. She was accompanied by her assistant during the morning hours, but around noon decided to walk alone along a shallow ravine to capture light variations on the canyon wall. The assistant, waiting near the jeep, saw her silhouette disappear around a bend. Minutes passed. She never returned. By 1400 hours, the assistant began calling her by radio. Static filled the channel. Park officers initiated a coordinated ground search by evening. The site was small, bordered by vertical rock faces with limited exit routes. Field log entry at 15:30, temperature 79 degrees Fahrenheit, sky clear, radio interference intermittent. Ruiz's backpack was found resting upright beside the ravine wall. Inside were her field notes, 2 lenses, and half a bottle of water. Her main camera was gone. No tracks led beyond that point, only dry sand untouched by movement. On the 2nd day, a helicopter traced the ravine's curve. From above, crew members spotted a silver reflection within a crevice 20 feet above the ground. When they reached it, they identified the missing camera wedged into the rock as if deliberately placed. The last photograph stored showed a blurred wall pattern resembling water, though the canyon was dry. No personal items, footprints, or fabric fibers were recovered elsewhere. Weather remained steady. Searchers expanded coverage to a 5-mile radius with no results. The report filed October 15th concluded, "Disappearance within confined terrain, visual line of sight lost under 2 minutes, subject unlocated, presumed missing." The silence of the canyon deepened after sunset. The temperature dropped rapidly, and wind began to whistle through narrow gaps, carrying sand that erased every trace by morning. Both Hale and Ruiz vanished within sight of their objectives, their tools left behind as if arranged for inventory. Field log entry at 18:48. Wind west 12 miles per hour. No visual contact. Search halted for night. The 2nd regional cluster had only begun. 2 years later, in May 2012, the final disappearance in the southwestern cluster occurred along the Paria Plateau on the Utah-Arizona border. The subject, 30-year-old park volunteer Brian Oates, had joined a 4-person team documenting rare plant habitats near the Vermilion Cliffs. The plateau is an open expanse of sandstone ridges and deep gullies. GPS coverage there can fail without warning. On the morning of May 9th, The group departed base camp at 7:10 a.m., moving northeast toward a marked observation point called Rock Table. Oates carried a handheld radio, a field camera, and a sample kit. Weather was calm. Temperature 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Sky clear. Around midday, the team spread out to catalog vegetation. Oates moved about 200 yards east to photograph a narrow basin filled with junipers. According to radio logs, his last transmission was routine. "Good light here, finishing shots and heading back." That was at 12:53. By 13:20, when he did not rejoin the others, they called repeatedly on the same channel. No response. At 1400, they reached his location. His camera tripod stood upright near the basin edge. Beside it lay a folded map and an unopened water bottle. His footprints ended 5 steps beyond the tripod, pressed clearly into the sand. Then, nothing. Field log entry at 1422, wind southwest 5 miles per hour. Sky cloudless, visibility excellent, subject unlocated. A search began within minutes. The terrain was open for miles, with scattered scrub and low cliffs. A person in bright clothing would have been visible. By evening, the county rescue team joined the effort with drones and 2 helicopters. Thermal scans detected only the residual warmth of rocks. At sunrise, a second sweep began, focusing on nearby sinkholes and crevices. No trace appeared. The following day, a ranger discovered Oates's radio on a small ledge 30 feet below the plateau rim. It showed no damage. Battery level 70%, channel still set to team frequency. The ledge itself was narrow, with no safe access from above or below. Breathing paragraph. The air there carries a high, dry hum. Sound vibrates against the stone and disappears in seconds. After 4 days, Search Command logged the area as negative for all indicators. Investigators examined his equipment left near the tripod. The camera contained 12 images from that morning. The last frame was completely black. No fault was found in the device. By the end of May, the incident was classified as unresolved disappearance. The team returned to the field office with a single crate of materials, 1 camera, 1 radio, 1 map, and a pair of footprints that ended mid-slope. Field summary notation reads, "No evidence of accident, fall, or foul play. Conditions ideal for visibility. Cause unknown." The Paria Plateau file concluded the 2nd regional cluster. Each subject, Hale, Ruiz, and Oates, vanished in daylight within confined search zones. Each left instruments positioned neatly and operational. No one saw them go. Breathing paragraph. At dusk, the rocks cooled, releasing stored heat in faint waves that rippled through the air like silent exhalations. After 2012, the region recorded no new incidents for several years. Rangers occasionally reviewed the logs, compared coordinates, and noted the similar environmental factors: dry air, clear sky, sudden loss of radio contact. Field log entry at 1631, terrain secure, communication stable, no further anomalies. The 3rd and final cluster in this archive concerns 3 separate disappearances in the Appalachian and Blue Ridge ranges between 2015 and 2022. Unlike the previous sectors, these cases include witnesses and partial recoveries. Each remains officially unresolved. The first occurred in Shenandoah National Park in early June 2015. 54-year-old botanist Margaret Ellison was conducting solo fieldwork along the Rapidan River Trail. She carried a backpack, plant samples, GPS unit, and handwritten log numbered 8. Her schedule indicated a return by 1700 hours. At 1620, another hiker descending the same route saw her sitting on a boulder beside the riverbank. He later told investigators that she looked tired, but calm, sorting through plant clippings. When he reached the parking area an hour later, her vehicle was still there. By nightfall, park headquarters recorded her as overdue. Search units deployed at dawn, starting from the location described by the witness. They found the same boulder, a small pile of leaves neatly arranged, and a pen lying beside a closed notebook. The notebook contained detailed notes about soil conditions, ending mid-sentence. There were no footprints leading away, and the river current nearby was too shallow to conceal a body. Field log entry at 7:10 a.m. Overcast sky. Mist along river corridor. Search Team Alpha deployed. Canine units detected faint scent toward the east slope, but lost it after 20 yards. Helicopter sweeps showed only dense canopy. On the second day, a park volunteer found Ellison's GPS device embedded upright in the soil, as if planted deliberately. The screen displayed a frozen coordinate identical to her last recorded location. Breathing paragraph. The forest was dense with early summer rain, each branch dripping slowly into the river. The search continued for 10 days. No further evidence emerged. The report dated June 14th stated, "Subject presumed missing in immediate area. Recovery negative. File retained for annual review." Her colleagues later established a small marker near the boulder, recording her final field entry. After the operation ended, rain returned, swelling the river until the marker nearly disappeared beneath the waterline. 2 summers later, in August 2017, another disappearance drew attention from both the National Park Service and local law enforcement. The site was the Great Smoky Mountains, Tennessee side, an area of steep ridges and humid valleys where fog often settles before sunrise. The missing person was 39-year-old trail maintenance worker Kevin Downs. He was responsible for inspecting the western loop near the Chimney Tops trailhead. According to base logs, he left at 6:55 a.m., carrying a small toolkit, a radio, and a canvas pack containing first aid supplies. The task required clearing fallen branches from a half-mile section. Estimated completion time, 3 hours. By midday, he had not reported back. Repeated calls on Channel 2 returned only static. A co-worker sent to check the area found Downs's toolkit resting on the path, neatly closed. The handle showed no wear or breakage. Nearby, a single radio earpiece lay in the mud. No footprints surrounded it. At 15:20, the initial search began with 3 rangers walking both sides of the trail. The weather was partly cloudy. Temperature 74 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity high. Visibility was fair within 20 meters, beyond which fog thickened. Field log entry at 15:51, wind south 4 miles per hour, partial fog cover, low acoustic carry. The team followed the trail to a ridge where Downs had been scheduled to trim a leaning pine. The canopy movement. Dogs picked up a scent heading downslope toward the creek, but lost it near the water. The creek itself was shallow, rocks visible through the current. On the 4th day, a ranger found Downs's canvas pack in a dry hollow about 100 yards from the trail. The straps were buckled, the contents orderly. Inside were 2 water bottles, both sealed, and a half-eaten sandwich. The pack was free of dirt, suggesting it had not lain there for long. No signs of animal interference were present. Field log entry at 10:33 a.m., light drizzle, temperature 66 degrees Fahrenheit, discovery logged and photographed. After 7 days, with no additional evidence, the command unit suspended active search operations. Official summary. Subject missing, presumed deceased, no body recovered, area stable. The radio and marking knife were catalogued as personal effects. Months later, hikers reported intermittent radio noise near the same ridge, similar to the static recorded in the Morton case years earlier in Washington. Technicians checking the channel found no transmissions on the allocated frequency. Breathing paragraph. The fog lifted slowly that autumn, revealing nothing beneath but moss and fallen needles. The following year, in September 2018, Blue Ridge Parkway authorities documented another disappearance of unusual nature. 31-year-old environmental student Lucas Wren was conducting a soil moisture survey near Craggy Gardens Overlook, North Carolina. He had been issued a digital sensor unit, a notepad, and a handheld GPS tracker. Weather at the time was overcast, but stable. Wren called his supervisor at 10:42 a.m., confirming successful calibration of the sensors. At 11:15, his GPS signal froze in place, registering at an altitude of 4,600 feet. Searchers arrived at 12:30 to the coordinates indicated. The device lay on the ground beside a small wooden post marking the overlook boundary. Nearby was his notepad, open to a blank page. His backpack and rain jacket hung on a branch above the slope. There were no footprints, no disturbance in the leaf litter. Field log entry at 13:24, wind east 9 miles per hour, cloud ceiling low, mist approaching. A ground sweep covered a half-mile radius. The slope beneath the overlook descended sharply but was navigable. Climbers rappelled to the base, marking sections with fluorescent tape. They found nothing. On the second day, an infrared drone detected a faint heat signature, approximately 300 yards downslope. A team descended immediately, but discovered only a patch of sun-warmed rock. The temperature differential was attributed to reflection. Breathing paragraph. The air smelled faintly of ozone, the sound of wind moving through pines like low static. By the fourth day, conditions deteriorated. Rain obscured visibility, and the search paused for safety. When teams returned, the tape markers were gone. They had not washed away, but had been removed cleanly. Investigators rechecked the area for signs of tampering or wildlife. None were found. The report dated September 15th stated, "Subject unlocated. Equipment recovered. Evidence suggests voluntary departure unlikely. Investigation pending." Wren's case joined the growing list of unresolved field incidents across the Blue Ridge sector. By 2019, internal documentation referenced a pattern: professionals and trained field personnel disappearing within mapped zones, often leaving functional instruments behind, each case lacking traceable exit routes. Field log entry at 16:50, low visibility, communication clear, search suspended for evening. Breathing paragraph. Rain fell lightly, tapping against the aluminum cases of the survey team. The forest returned to stillness. In late October 2022, the last known disappearance in the Appalachian cluster occurred within the dense hardwood slopes of Pisgah National Forest, North Carolina. The missing man, 45-year-old backcountry guide and former firefighter Daniel Kerr, had been contracted to lead a small orientation course for new park recruits. According to training records, the group consisted of 4 participants. The exercise involved navigating a 2-mile section of trail near Cold Spring Gap, practicing radio coordination and route marking. Conditions that morning were calm, sky overcast, temperature 58 degrees Fahrenheit. The group departed the base at 8:30 a.m. Kerr was assigned point position, carrying a field compass, radio, and emergency pack. Recruits followed in line at 50-foot intervals. Around 10:15, they reached a clearing used as waypoint alpha. Kerr radioed back to confirm arrival and began explaining compass triangulation. One of the recruits later stated that a faint crackling noise interrupted the transmission, like electrical discharge. Kerr asked the others to hold position while he checked a nearby ridge for interference. He walked into the trees and disappeared from view. He was gone less than 2 minutes. When he failed to return, the recruits called his name several times, then used the radio. No response. They waited another 5 minutes before reporting to the base supervisor. Within an hour, the first responders were en route to the coordinates. Field log entry at 11:42, wind calm, light mist, search initiated along East Ridge sector. The clearing showed no signs of disturbance. The recruits' footprints were clear in soft soil, but Kerr's trail ended abruptly, 10 paces beyond the last visible boot mark. The soil there was intact, covered in damp leaves. No drag lines, no compression. By 1300, search teams expanded to adjacent ridges, marking trees with reflective tape. Drone footage showed dense canopy, but no anomalies. At 1520, a ranger found Kerr's compass on the forest floor, needle spinning continuously despite the absence of wind or magnetized rock. The instrument ceased movement when lifted. Breathing paragraph. The fog drifted through branches in thin layers, dimming light until the forest seemed submerged underwater. Over the next 2 days, more than 70 people participated in coordinated search efforts. Dogs followed faint scent traces southeast for half a mile before losing them near a shallow ravine. A thermal scan that night registered no human heat sources within the 5-mile grid. On the third morning, a radio belonging to Kerr was discovered standing upright against a tree trunk. Battery intact, volume turned to low. The serial number matched the missing unit. The ground beneath it was undisturbed, dry despite previous rain. Field log entry at 9:16 a.m. Temperature 49 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity 87%, radio recovered, channel silent. After 5 days, command closed the active search phase. Official wording: subject unlocated, final known position confirmed at waypoint Alpha. No evidence of foul play. Breathing paragraph. At dawn, the forest was motionless, dew forming on the recovered compass until the glass fogged over. The Kerr file completed the third cluster. 3 regions, 9 disappearances, 30 years apart. None resolved. The archives that follow reconstruct search patterns, environmental factors, and recovered materials to establish operational consistency. Every case shares certain procedural elements: clear weather, daytime conditions, functional equipment, sudden cessation of contact, and absence of physical evidence. Field synthesis report logged at 14:10 hours. Analyst initials unreadable. Notation pattern continuity observed. Beyond the official records, retired personnel occasionally spoke of atmospheric anomalies, brief static interference on radios, compass deviation, and abrupt silence where sound should have carried for miles. These reports were never entered into formal databases but appear in personal field journals stored in regional offices. Breathing paragraph. The tone of such notes is subdued, factual, written in pencil fading with moisture. One such journal belonged to retired Ranger Harold Wex, who participated in multiple searches during the late 1990s. In his personal copy of Map Record 7, he marked small circles across several parks in different states, all labeled with the same word: loss. When questioned years later, he described them as points where people went missing and where equipment stopped working. His notes are brief. Fog arrived without forecast. Dogs stopped barking. Compass north variable. Official investigators reviewing Wex's entries found no direct correlation between the coordinates and recorded disappearances, though several locations aligned within 5 miles of known incidents. Field log entry at 17:20. Barometer steady. Visibility poor. Search inactive. Reference to Wex journal appended. The document archive ends without conclusions. Each case remains open, status unchanged. Yet within ranger circles, stories persist of voices on unused frequencies or lights glimpsed between trees after midnight patrols. The accounts are not dramatic, merely factual statements lacking explanation. Breathing paragraph. The wind across the ridges makes a constant low vibration that merges with distant static, erasing the boundary between weather and sound. The subsequent section returns to detailed reconstructions of specific searches, beginning with the renewed inquiry into the Eberly disappearance, reopened in 2024 for comparative analysis. The renewed review of the Eberly case began in early February 2024. A small archival team from the regional office reopened the Olympic National Park disappearance file for technical comparison with later incidents. The purpose was procedural, to test new terrain mapping software against historical data. Ranger logs from 1996 were digitized. Several handwritten notes had never been entered into the main database. Among them was a single page titled Follow-up Zone 3, dated 3 days after the search had been suspended. The handwriting differed slightly from Eberly's immediate supervisor, suggesting another officer added it later. The note read, "Visual anomaly across water surface, cause unverified, recorded for completeness." No coordinates were attached. Field log entry at 9:22 a.m., wind northwest 8 miles per hour. Overcast. Document transcription in progress. The modern review team used topographic overlays to match possible viewpoints along the Hoh River corridor. Satellite reconstruction suggested a low basin where the water bends sharply west. That section had not been surveyed since the original operation due to erosion and fallen timber. On March 3rd, 2 park technicians conducted a limited ground check to resample the area. They located fragments of old flagging tape embedded in moss. Color faded to gray. A rusted metal buckle lay nearby, type consistent with 1990s ranger gear. Soil testing found no organic residue. Breathing paragraph. The air in that basin carried heavy moisture, the smell of cedar and decay. The sound of the river was constant but distant, like static through a closed door. Later that afternoon, the technicians reported faint radio interference, localized to a 10-meter radius around the basin edge. The anomaly ceased when they moved uphill. Equipment checks found no fault. The interference frequency did not match any active channel. The findings were entered into the database as unexplained radio behavior, minor. Field log entry at 1635, temperature 48 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity 90%, interference duration 3 minutes, then normal. No further action was recorded. The Eberly file was again marked closed. Attention then turned to the Hale disappearance from 2010 in Capitol Reef. A fresh analysis was ordered after a volunteer hiker located a partially corroded data tag bearing Hale's initials HIRD on aluminum. The tag was found 50 miles south of the original search area at the base of an exposed sandstone bluff. The object matched the style of personal sample markers issued to geologists during that period. Forensic review confirmed identical tool marks to those on his recovered camera. No other materials were discovered nearby. The discovery renewed interest in correlating later Southwest cases. A re-examination of Ruiz and Oates field records revealed a shared signature. Each final photograph contained a surface pattern resembling moving water, though the regions were arid at the time. Analysts tested both cameras under controlled lighting, but could not replicate the distortion. Breathing paragraph. In the lab, the images produced no sound, yet the technicians described a faint sense of vibration when viewed on screen, as if the pixels pulsed irregularly. Field log entry at 11:12 a.m., location Capitol Reef Archive Lab, humidity 32%, no radio anomalies, test inconclusive. A report issued mid-year summarized these findings under the heading, Common Factors, Possibly Environmental. The term was administrative, not interpretive. No causal explanation followed. Meanwhile, the Kerr file from Pisgah Forest received parallel review. Rangers conducting trail restoration near Cold Spring Gap reported discovering 2 items matching his inventory list, a flashlight and a pocket notebook. Both lay beneath a fallen log, about 100 yards from the original waypoint Alpha. The flashlight still contained batteries, though corroded. The notebook was soaked, pages fused. Only the first entry remained legible. Drift test stable. Compass check every 10. Investigators noted the lack of debris or animal disturbance. The objects appeared clean, as if recently placed. Field log entry at 1440. Temperature 53 degrees Fahrenheit. Mist rising. Sample recovery complete. DNA tests confirmed the items belonged to Kerr. No trace evidence from the surrounding soil indicated prior burial or movement. The official update concluded. Evidence aged inconsistently with environmental exposure. Time frame uncertain. Breathing paragraph. The ridge remained quiet under cloud cover, the sound of dripping water marking each passing second. Across all 9 cases, field summaries maintained consistent language. No sign of struggle, daylight conditions, recovered objects showing minimal wear, absence of biological trace. The similarities did not meet investigative thresholds for direct connection, yet the pattern persisted across 3 decades and thousands of miles. Field review log summary closed with notation. No correlation established. Recommendation annual audit. As the archival study ended, a final remark was entered by an anonymous reviewer. It read simply, "Pattern complete. Parameters remain open." The sentence was underlined once in black ink. By autumn of 2024, The Internal Review Committee had completed its regional comparison charts. The analysis listed terrain type, weather, and operational sequence for each disappearance. When plotted on a national map, the points formed a loose diagonal from the Olympic Peninsula through the desert southwest to the Appalachian Ridges. No agency official claimed statistical relevance, yet the alignment was quietly noted in several memos. A request was filed to revisit one of the southwestern sectors, specifically the Paria Plateau site of the Oates disappearance. The objective was to verify erosion data and update trail coordinates that had shifted due to seasonal wind. Field log entry at 7:40 a.m., temperature 72 degrees Fahrenheit, sky clear, mission scope limited to surface mapping and drone reconnaissance. The survey team consisted of 2 rangers and 1 geologist. They camped at the base of the cliffs and launched drone flights over the basin where Oates's footprints had once been recorded. The drone's visual feed returned stable until 9:21, when image transmission froze for 12 seconds. Upon recovery, the feed displayed static interference and a sequence of light distortions across the sand. The pattern resembled moving ripples, though no air movement was present. Ground personnel observed nothing unusual from their position. The phenomenon appeared only through the camera lens. The video file was archived, labeled Visual Anomaly 1, breathing paragraph. The desert that morning was silent. No insects audible, only heat rising in thin waves from the rock. After returning to base, the team attempted to replicate the interference by flying the drone along the same trajectory. The video stream remained clear. Technical review later confirmed the camera's internal temperature had spiked briefly without environmental cause. Field log entry at 10:16 a.m. Wind negligible, equipment stable, anomaly not repeated. These new data entries were appended to the Oates file, but did not alter its status. Still, they reignited discussion among search technicians about optical distortion recorded at other sites. Similar irregular reflections had been documented in the Hale and Ruiz photo archives, though under different conditions. In December, the review expanded to include electromagnetic readings from older cases. Analysts retrieved transmission logs from the Morton disappearance in Mount Baker, where the glove had vanished during fog conditions. The original recordings, stored on tape, were converted to digital format. During playback, at timestamp 1542, a narrow band signal appeared. 3 seconds of high-frequency sound preceding the loss of radio contact. The frequency was measured at 22 kHz, above normal voice range, but below common static interference levels. It matched no known park equipment. Field log entry at 14:25, audio analysis conducted under controlled environment, anomaly present, origin undetermined, breathing paragraph. Inside the archive lab, the faint tone lingered even after playback ended, like the echo of wind through cross-reference checks revealed a brief similar pulse in the audio communication seconds before striking outside. That recording, taken at this dimension course, displayed the same frequency and duration. The matching signature-linked cases separated by thousands of miles and nearly 25 years. The discovery prompted a request for an independent audit. The Department of Interior's Technical Bureau examined the files and issued a short statement. Signal may represent coincidental interference from transient atmospheric source. No further inquiry followed. Field log entry at 16:33, review board adjourned, data retained for record integrity. For most personnel, the matter ended there. But among field officers, private notes began to circulate. Handwritten observations comparing compass drift, intermittent static, and missing time logs across different parks. None reached official archives. One such note, unsigned, summarized an incident during the Hale search in 2010. At dusk, reflection seen moving against wind direction. When approached, area cooled suddenly. Drone camera failed for 9 seconds. Operator felt pressure in ears similar to altitude change. Breathing paragraph. The desert holds sound unevenly. At dusk, the echo of one's own voice can seem delayed, as if returning from a distance greater than the landscape allows. Despite these internal accounts, no agency has drawn formal conclusions. All 9 disappearances remain categorized as separate missing person events. The re-examination reports close with the same line repeated across files. Status unchanged, probability of recovery minimal, condition stable. Yet, in the quiet notation margin of the last document, an additional entry appears, written by an unknown reviewer. Environmental cause unlikely. Review again if new data arises. Field log summary ended at 17:10 hours. Temperature dropping. Sunlight reduced to a thin red band along the western rim. Winter along the Olympic Peninsula brings a steady gray light that seldom changes through the day. In January 2025, an environmental maintenance team working near the Ho River reported a partial collapse along the north bank. The erosion exposed layers of silt and timber previously unreachable. Among the debris, workers found a corroded metal clasp attached to a remnant of nylon strap. The dimensions matched harness equipment from the 1990s Ranger Kit list. Field log entry at 9:41 a.m. Temperature 43 degrees Fahrenheit. Light rain. Object recovered and sealed for transfer. The strap bore partial initials, E and B, faint but legible. Laboratory comparison later confirmed the material type identical to Ranger Thomas Eberle's standard pack harness. Soil residue suggested recent displacement, not long-term burial. The surrounding sediment showed clear signs of water agitation within the past year, meaning the item had likely been freed from an upstream deposit. No additional evidence appeared. The discovery did not alter the case status, but added one more data point to a file that had remained dormant for nearly 3 decades. Breathing paragraph. The forest that morning was layered in mist, the sound of rain constant against leaves, blending with the low hum of water through channels below. After the Olympic find, the review team decided to repeat similar erosion inspections in older missing person zones. The next scheduled operation focused on Shenandoah, where botanist Margaret Ellison had vanished in 2015. Rangers reopened the Rapidan River corridor during low water conditions to remap flood-prone areas. At a gravel bend, roughly 200 yards downstream from her last known position, they located an embedded object reflecting sunlight. It proved to be a stainless steel sample container, the same brand Ellison had recorded in her supply inventory. The lid was sealed. Inside lay dried plant material and a folded slip of paper with coordinates printed in pencil. The numbers corresponded to her original survey grid, but the handwriting was unfamiliar. Field log entry at 12:22, overcast sky, visibility 30 yards. Object recovered, specimen preserved. Analysis later showed the handwriting belonged to a park intern assigned to Ellison's project 2 days after her disappearance. The intern confirmed never handling that container. He had joined the search, but had not visited that specific river bend. Breathing paragraph. Mist rose from the water, the smell of wet stone filling the air. It was quiet enough to hear the soft hiss of the current against the gravel. The paper's graphite appeared fresh, unweathered, as if written within the past few years rather than a decade earlier. No fingerprint residue was detectable. The container was logged and stored in cold archive. Parallel to these field operations, data technicians reviewed satellite images from each historical site, using updated spectral analysis to detect soil disturbance or heat retention patterns missed in earlier scans. When combined, several sites revealed circular zones of altered vegetation, slight discolorations roughly 30 meters wide, appearing months after the initial disappearances and fading over subsequent seasons. The effect occurred in 5 of the 9 recorded cases. Field log entry at 1450. Spectral overlay complete. Anomalies noted at coordinates consistent with incident zones. Origin natural processes undetermined. Internal memos described them as temporary growth differentials, possibly due to soil composition or reflective changes. No correlation was formally claimed. Breathing paragraph. On screen, the imagery appeared grainy, faint halos of lighter color in an otherwise uniform landscape. In early February, one final test was performed. Radio equipment identical to that used in the Morton and Kerr cases was activated at both sites simultaneously. Operators monitored the emergency frequency at set intervals. During the first 2 days, transmission remained stable. On the third morning, a short pulse, 22 kHz, identical to previous anomalies, registered at both locations within the same 10-second window. Field log entry at 10:47 a.m. Simultaneous interference detected. Duration 4 seconds. Amplitude low. No external signal sources identified. Independent verification by the communications lab ruled out satellite crosstalk. The official explanation cited atmospheric coincidence. The probability was listed as low, but plausible. The data were archived under standard environmental category. No field follow-up was authorized. Breathing paragraph. That day, weather across both regions was clear and windless. Rangers reported a stillness in the air before the static arrived, followed by silence sharp enough to seem physical. All findings were compiled into a single reference volume, known informally as the Missing Field Correlation Study. The report contained 300 pages of charts, graphs, and transcribed logs. It concluded with one neutral statement. No causative link established between regional incidents. Recommend continued documentation under normal missing person procedures. The file was classified as closed reference material, not for public distribution. Field archive entry closed at 17:20 hours. Barometer falling. Humidity rising. No further anomalies recorded. By late spring of 2025, the Missing Field Correlation Study had been filed into storage at the Department of Interior Records Center in Denver. Yet regional rangers continued to send in informal notes about equipment irregularities and signal interference. These reports carried no official standing, but often mirrored details from the earlier incidents. In May, a seasonal worker stationed at Mount Baker noted hearing faint radio feedback during a patrol near the same turnout, where Ranger Claire Morton's truck had been found years earlier. He wrote in his daily log that the noise repeated at regular intervals, 3 short pulses followed by a longer one. The channel was verified as inactive. Field log entry at 10:14 a.m. Temperature 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Fog along ridge. Signal pattern repeated 4 times before ceasing. 2 weeks later, maintenance staff at Pisgah National Forest recorded similar interference while calibrating new weather sensors. The same 4-beat pulse was captured by the data logger. Frequency measured 22.1 kHz. Technicians compared the samples. The waveforms matched precisely. Both events occurred within the same day's window, adjusted for time zones. Internal communications flagged the duplication as noteworthy, but not actionable. Breathing paragraph. Morning air along the ridge was heavy with dew. The sky the color of slate, the static fading into ordinary wind. At the same time, vegetation surveys in the Capitol Reef area documented a circular region of reduced growth near Hale's original campsite. The diameter measured 31 meters. No chemical residue or mineral variation could account for the pattern. Satellite archives showed it forming gradually over a 10-month period before returning to normal density. Field log entry at 13:55. Wind south 7 miles per hour. Light overcast. Vegetation anomaly observed. Sample collection initiated. Samples from the affected zone revealed slightly increased magnetite content in the upper soil layers. The reading was marginal, below geological significance, but consistent with reports from other cases. Soil from unaffected areas showed baseline values. Breathing paragraph. The desert air that afternoon was motionless, heat shimmering above the rock like a transparent veil. The Department of Interior Technical Board added these results as appendices to the existing correlation file. No further resources were allocated. The official position remained unchanged. Environmental coincidence cannot be ruled out. Further investigation unnecessary at this time. Field log entry at 1521. Data upload complete. Magnetite variance noted. Correlation not established. Despite bureaucratic closure, rangers in multiple parks began conducting unsanctioned equipment tests during off hours. Some recorded compass drift, while others documented low-level vibration detected through handheld seismographs. None of these readings showed consistent amplitude or direction, yet the timing of the disturbances often aligned with the recurring signal pulses. One such test occurred in June at Shenandoah, organized by a small volunteer team from the local search and rescue unit. Using a basic handheld transmitter, they attempted to replicate the static pattern. During the second transmission cycle, their signal was overridden by a brief burst of feedback originating from the same frequency band. The amplitude peaked, then dropped to 0. Field log entry at 23:18, night sky clear, temperature 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Unexpected signal inversion lasting 2 seconds. Audio analysis later confirmed the waveform identical to those from Mount Baker and Pisgah. The replication ended immediately afterward, and the volunteers discontinued the test. The event was noted privately in the team's after-action log, but never submitted to higher authority. Breathing paragraph. The mountain at night was quiet except for insects and the slow drift of mist through tree gaps. The static had vanished as quickly as it came. Within ranger networks, these occurrences circulated by word of mouth. No one claimed connection to the old disappearances, yet every mention returned to the same frequency, the same duration, and the same outcome: silence that followed without echo. By midsummer, several parks reported short-lived outages in their handheld radios. Each lasted under 10 seconds, never repeating in the same location. None caused operational issues. The timing matched no known solar or atmospheric events. Field log entry at 1746. Composite analysis completed. Cross-regional outage correlation pending. Cause unknown. Breathing paragraph. Across the open spaces of the west, the evening light faded to gray. The air itself seemed still, layered in quiet static too faint for the ear. The correlation study, thought to be final, gained one more update entry. Its last line read, "Minor transmission irregularities observed nationwide. Pattern indeterminate. Continuing observation recommended." The document was dated August 2nd, 2025, and left unsigned. Late in August 2025, a maintenance helicopter conducting aerial inspection over the North Cascades detected an unusual light reflection near a canyon east of Stehekin Valley. The pilot assumed it to be debris from old fire operations. Coordinates were marked for ground follow-up. 2 days later, a ranger team reached the site by foot. The area lay within a restricted burn zone, closed since the disappearance of fire technician Peter Lann in 2009. At the base of a shallow ravine, half buried in gravel, they found a metallic cylinder roughly the size of a flashlight casing. The object bore partial serial markings corresponding to the lot numbers issued to firefighting units in that same year. Field log entry at 9:42 a.m., temperature 67 degrees Fahrenheit, wind variable, object retrieved, corrosion moderate. Inside the cylinder was a small roll of paper, sealed in plastic wrap. The note contained a list of coordinates and short notations. North line stable, soil cool, pressure consistent. The handwriting was printed in capital letters, steady, technical in style. Ink analysis later confirmed the pigment type manufactured between 2008 and 2010. The coordinates led back to the exact perimeter of Land's last known patrol area. No other identifying marks appeared. Breathing paragraph. The canyon walls rose steep on both sides, trapping air and sound. Each voice from the search team came back, delayed, hollow. The recovered object was sent to the district laboratory. Under magnification, faint fingerprints were identified, but too degraded for match. The paper itself showed no water damage, suggesting it had remained sealed and sheltered from exposure. Field log entry at 1310, humidity 40%, evidence secured, chain of custody maintained. The item renewed interest in the land case among field officers. Several noted that each new discovery, the harness strap, the sample container, the magnetite soil patch, surfaced years after initial disappearance, often following ground disturbance or weather change. None of these items displayed the expected signs of long-term decay. In response, a brief memorandum was circulated among district supervisors requesting inventory of all missing person artifacts found after 2 years of presumed exposure. The data revealed consistent patterns of preservation: intact seals, minimal corrosion, clean surfaces. The report concluded that all items had likely been reintroduced to the environment, not recently unearthed. Breathing paragraph. The notion was logged without comment. The desert wind pressed low against the ground, and each recovered object seemed untouched by time. In mid-September, another observation came from Great Smoky Mountains. A volunteer clearing a maintenance trail discovered a radio handset identical to those used by field crews during the down search in 2017. The device's casing was scuffed, but the internal circuits tested functional. When powered on, it displayed the channel set to 2, the same frequency where static had first been reported. Field log entry at 1421, temperature 70 degrees Fahrenheit, visibility clear, device reactivated, brief pulse detected upon startup. The signal lasted exactly 3 seconds. The waveform matched prior 22 kHz patterns, but with lower amplitude. The radio shut itself off immediately afterward. When restarted, the device operated normally. The recovered unit was tagged and transferred for analysis. No storage logs confirmed its issue to any other ranger. Its serial number was missing. Breathing paragraph. Clouds built slowly over the ridge, pale and silent, as though holding sound inside them. The following week, communications technicians reviewed cumulative data from all recent findings. A consistent time ratio emerged between signal pulses and equipment reactivation events. 22 seconds between onset and decay in every recorded instance. Field log entry at 1542. Composite frequency review complete. Consistency noted across all devices. No source identified. Administrative notes again emphasized atmospheric explanation. Yet the recurrence of time intervals and the increasing frequency of object recoveries across multiple states led to internal unease. A quiet directive instructed park offices to document any new electromagnetic interference immediately, even if duration lasted under 1 second. By October, the internal reporting threshold had grown heavy with entries. Small incidents of interference, uncorrelated but unmistakably similar. Breathing paragraph. Across the forests and valleys, autumn air thickened with moisture. Leaves fell soundlessly onto wet ground. The final line in the North Cascades log that year read, "Recovered equipment shows signs of deliberate placement. Condition not compatible with long-term exposure. Case open for indefinite review." Field archive entry closed at 1730 hours, light fading, barometer steady, silence complete. By early November 2025, the pattern of delayed recoveries had entered internal discussion sessions between park supervisors and technical staff. The meetings were procedural, held without public record, intended only to evaluate storage policy for old case materials. Yet the minutes reflected an emerging concern: how objects absent for decades continued to reappear intact. Field log entry at 8:52 a.m., overcast sky, temperature 49 degrees Fahrenheit. Discussion summary drafted for circulation. In one session, a veteran ranger mentioned a personal observation from years earlier in Shenandoah. During a night patrol near the Rapidan River, he had seen what he described as a pale illumination within the tree canopy, roughly circular, silent, and stationary for several seconds before vanishing. No record of this was ever filed at the time, but now he wondered if it related to electromagnetic activity later measured along that same corridor. His account was included in the transcript with the note, "Visual observation unverified." Breathing paragraph. The forest outside the administrative building was dark by mid-afternoon, rain falling in fine threads that shimmered briefly before fading into soil. The following week, another maintenance team reported an unplanned signal broadcast detected on emergency frequency 123.45. The source appeared mobile, moving across the Great Smoky Mountains in a straight path from southwest to northeast at approximately 2 miles per minute. It lasted 8 minutes before disappearing entirely. Data review showed no aircraft or satellite activity in that region at the time. The signal carried no modulation, only a constant tone measured at the same 22 kHz range. Field log entry at 1612. Wind northwest 11 miles per hour. Barometric pressure stable. Tone duration 8 minutes. Source unconfirmed. The tone was recorded and stored in Audio Archive File 5. Engineers who listened later described a faint harmonic vibration layered beneath the main frequency, almost rhythmic. When graphed, it resembled a series of repeating arcs decreasing in amplitude until silence. No official explanation was issued. The phenomenon was logged as temporary transmission anomaly. Breathing paragraph. Night in the mountain valleys was heavy with fog, air still, the radio masts motionless against the gray. Meanwhile, the erosion survey along the Olympic corridor continued despite winter closure. On December 4th, a technician collecting soil samples near the Hoh River noticed small circular impressions in the ground, each 4 inches wide and uniformly spaced, forming a half ring around a cedar trunk. The impressions were shallow, unconnected by tracks, and too symmetrical for animal prints. Photographs were taken before rain erased them. The images later measured the radius at approximately 30 inches, matching the average circumference of magnetite growth zones seen in earlier spectral images. Field log entry at 10:41. Mist dense. Temperature 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Impressions documented and lost within 30 minutes of rainfall. The observation was appended to the correlation file with the remark, "Pattern consistent with prior surface anomalies." No further on-site investigation occurred due to seasonal hazard conditions. Breathing paragraph. The rain intensified, flattening sound. Only water and wind remained audible across the low valley. By year's end, the consolidated archive of all 9 historical cases had grown to more than 500 pages. Each new discovery or interference event carried the same procedural note: observation without interpretation. The accumulated documentation formed a chain of partial evidence, none sufficient for conclusion, yet too uniform to ignore. An internal circular released on December 19th instructed all park districts to retain recovered materials indefinitely, regardless of relevance. The memo contained one short paragraph without signature. Maintain custody of all anomalous artifacts until further notice. If returned items show no degradation, treat as active evidence. Field log entry at 11:27. Light snow. Visibility moderate. Directive acknowledged by all districts. Breathing paragraph. Snow settled on branches, soft and continuous, absorbing every trace of earlier sound. On the final page of the year's summary, a technician wrote a marginal note in pencil. If objects can return unchanged, what remains missing may not be lost. The line was underlined once, then left without comment. Field archive closure recorded at 17:10 hours, barometer steady, communications normal, static absent. January 2026 opened with heavy snowfall across the western parks. Access roads remained closed, limiting field activity. During this period of enforced stillness, analysts turned to comparative review of acoustic data from prior cases. They examined the short pulses, the feedback tones, and the constant low static present before signal loss. The same narrow frequency range appeared in every documented recording. Field log entry at 9:31 a.m. Outside temperature 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Laboratory environment stable. Analysis in progress. Technicians applied frequency isolation to remove environmental noise. What remained was a precise pattern of repetition. 3 equal intervals followed by 1 longer pause, mirroring the radio pulses heard in Mount Baker and Pisgah. The signal carried no modulation and no coded transmission, only vibration in the upper register of human hearing. When spectrally enhanced, the waveform revealed microfluctuations corresponding to time intervals of 1.2 seconds. Across 9 cases spanning 30 years, the pattern had never deviated. Breathing paragraph. The sound inside the lab was faint, the hum of equipment blending with the tone until distinction blurred. An internal note marked this discovery as constant periodicity across separate environments, origin not terrestrial verified. The language remained procedural, yet the phrasing implied that no natural explanation had been identified. At the same time, meteorological archives from each incident date were compiled. Analysts found no evidence of atmospheric activity capable of generating sustained electromagnetic pulses of that frequency. No lightning strikes, auroras, or solar flares aligned with the times recorded in the field logs. Field log entry at 11:45. Sky clear. Pressure rising. Anomaly classification maintained. In mid-February, a ranger from Capitol Reef conducting a routine winter inspection discovered a narrow section of ground where snow refused to settle. The area measured roughly 10 feet in diameter, forming a near-perfect circle of exposed sandstone. The air above it registered 2 degrees warmer than surrounding terrain. Photographs were taken, but within 24 hours, wind covered the site completely. The phenomenon was never observed again. Breathing paragraph. The desert night followed without sound, only stars reflecting faintly on ice crusts along dry stream beds. In March, the Communications Bureau installed new encrypted radio systems across several national parks. Almost immediately, reports began of intermittent dropouts when units entered specific valleys, Shenandoah, Great Smoky Mountains, and Olympic among them. The new devices were designed to resist static and interference, yet at unpredictable intervals, transmission would halt for exactly 22 seconds before resuming. Field log entry at 14:21. Operational test. Device reset confirmed. Interruption duration consistent with prior data. Technicians replaced batteries, swapped antennas, and repeated calibration. Results remained unchanged. The interruptions followed no pattern of terrain or altitude. They occurred in clear weather as often as in rain. A memo to the Department of Interior described the situation as localized communication irregularity, not affecting safety. The note contained a recommendation to document duration and frequency, but not to modify hardware further. Breathing paragraph. In the mountain corridors, the new radios emitted brief hisses of white noise that faded as quickly as they came. Meanwhile, a civilian hiker in North Carolina reported discovering a laminated page of field notes while clearing brush near Craggy Gardens, the same area where student Lucas Wren had disappeared years earlier. The page listed soil readings identical to those in his final logbook, but the ink was darker, unworn. Forensic testing dated the material to recent manufacture. Field log entry at 10:15 a.m. Overcast sky, humidity high, recovered document intact. Paper type post dates original case. The note's origin remained untraceable. It was stored with other recovered items under controlled temperature. Its lines were written in the same concise script as Wren's known handwriting, confirmed through expert comparison. Breathing paragraph. The hills above Asheville filled with morning fog that moved in thin layers, erasing boundaries between trees and air. The discovery reawakened public curiosity once the document's existence leaked through an internal report. Officials issued a standard statement denying new evidence, but local newspapers ran brief articles summarizing the coincidence. Within weeks, hikers began revisiting older disappearance sites, searching for artifacts of their own. None were reported through official channels. Field log entry at 16:38. Public interest moderate. No unauthorized entries recorded. Communication stable. At quarter's end, analysts summarized all new data into a provisional update titled Ongoing Environmental Anomalies, 1996-2026. It contained no conclusions. The final paragraph read, "Conditions persist without escalation. Observation continues." Breathing paragraph. Snowmelt filled streams across the Cascades, the sound steady and unbroken, masking the faint static that sometimes returned at dusk. By April 2026, regional offices resumed standard patrols as snow receded from the higher elevations. The renewed access allowed technicians to inspect several former search corridors that had remained undiscovered. Appeared to be a weathered compass casing, its glass intact, needle fixed pointing west. Initial assumption identified it as a common hiker's instrument, but microscopic etching on the side displayed initials matching Eberle's name as recorded in inventory lists from 1996. The casing was recovered and catalogued. Its surface showed no corrosion beneath the moss layer, as if newly placed. Breathing paragraph. Morning light filtered through damp cedar branches, droplets scattering faint reflections across the moss. The discovery triggered a localized soil study around the fallen tree. Results showed minimal sediment accumulation, meaning the compass had not been embedded for long. The report filed April 8th concluded, time of deposition inconsistent with presumed date of loss, field log entry at 12:15, humidity 91%, analysis verified, compass transported for storage. Meanwhile, the Shenandoah district experienced an unrelated incident involving radio malfunction during flood monitoring operations. 2 rangers reported the abrupt onset of a low-frequency tone lasting precisely 22 seconds before normal communication resumed. Both described an accompanying static that did not register on recording equipment. The event was logged but not investigated further. Breathing paragraph. The river below the observation deck moved heavy with rainwater, surface opaque, air thick with moisture. In June, the Great Smoky Mountains office received an anonymous package delivered through standard postal service. Inside was a sealed plastic pouch containing a single glove marked with a maintenance label from 2017, the year Kevin Downs had disappeared. The glove bore no wear and matched the size noted in his clothing record. The package contained no return address. Field log entry at 9:52 a.m. Postal intake, temperature 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Item authenticated. Origin unknown. Forensic inspection found the fiber composition unchanged, showing no environmental aging. DNA sampling confirmed a partial match to Downs's stored personal effects. The item was logged as recovered material and appended to his case file. The postal stamp originated from a regional center near Knoxville, but surveillance records showed no sender identification. Breathing paragraph. Summer heat settled over the hills, and the sound of insects replaced the usual wind through trees. Across departments, administrators debated whether to continue treating these isolated recoveries as coincidence or reopen old cases for limited review. The cost of further searches discouraged action. A final memo stated, "Recovered items do not meet threshold for reactivation. Maintain observation posture. Field log entry at 1741. Communication stable. Decision logged. All units return to standard patrol." By midsummer, the pattern of intermittent equipment behavior continued. Brief static bursts, compass drift, and occasional loss of GPS accuracy. Most incidents occurred near known disappearance coordinates, but extended sporadically into adjacent valleys. None lasted more than 30 seconds. Technicians mapping these disturbances noticed a repeating orientation of affected sites along a northwest to southeast bearing, identical to the diagonal alignment traced years earlier in the correlation study. Field log entry at 1522. Data alignment consistent with prior study. Pattern confirmed. No inference recorded. Breathing paragraph. Air along the ridges remained still. Warm currents rising against cooler wind layers, creating faint tremors that rippled through the forest canopy. When compiled into a single overlay, the anomalies marked a line running from the Pacific coast to the southern Appalachians. The report included no interpretation, only a closing note. Frequency disturbances continue to manifest along historical corridor. Strength variable, source unconfirmed. Field summary concluded at 18:10 hours. Barometer steady, wind calm, silence complete. August 2026 brought steady high pressure across most western parks. The weather remained clear for weeks, offering near-perfect visibility. This made the next series of field events more noticeable because they occurred under ideal observation conditions with no meteorological interference recorded. Field log entry at 7:23 a.m., temperature 63 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity 45%, visibility unlimited, all systems operational. During a ranger patrol near Mineral Creek in Olympic National Park, a signal flare was reported in the distance at approximately 9:15. The flare rose vertically, white in color, lasting 6 seconds before extinguishing. The area was restricted and uninhabited at that time. Patrol units reached the coordinates within 40 minutes. No personnel or equipment were found, and no residue from pyrotechnic material was detected. The incident was entered into Logbook 27 under the title Unauthorized Illumination. Subsequent checks with forestry and rescue departments confirmed no training exercises in progress. Breathing paragraph. The forest air remained motionless, filled only with insect noise fading in and out of the tree canopy. 1 week later, in Pisgah National Forest, a communications technician experienced a sudden interruption on his handheld unit. The sound that replaced the transmission was not static, but a high-pitched modulation rising and falling in perfect intervals for exactly 22 seconds. When playback was reviewed, the modulation appeared as a series of narrow peaks forming a symmetric shape. Field log entry at 10:32. Sky overcast. Wind southeast 5 miles per hour. Anomaly recorded. Amplitude consistent with prior events. The file was forwarded to the Communications Bureau, where analysis confirmed the waveform identical to the tones documented in the 1996 and 2009 disappearances. It became the 13th verified instance of recurrence. In September, Shenandoah Rangers conducting vegetation surveys reported a narrow corridor of withered grass stretching from the riverbank up a slope for 40 meters. The strip measured 3 feet wide, perfectly straight, with soil hardened as if exposed to brief, intense heat. No scorch marks or ash were present. Laboratory samples later showed magnetite traces at levels similar to the Capitol Reef anomaly. Breathing paragraph. Morning haze clung to the low trees. When the sun broke through, steam rose faintly along the barren strip. Field log entry at 9:12 a.m., temperature 61 degrees Fahrenheit, visual anomaly documented, samples stored, origin undetermined. Parallel to these observations, the Great Smoky Mountains maintenance team reported a second mailed delivery, identical in format to the package received months earlier. This time, the contents included a folded map marked with a small red circle at the location of Kevin Downs' last recorded coordinates. The map paper matched government issue from 2017. The ink was recent. Postal trace analysis again failed to identify sender or location of origin. The circle was drawn precisely at the same latitude and longitude that field teams had used to establish their search base. Field log entry at 12:48. Item verified. Chain of custody recorded. Additional inquiry suspended. Breathing paragraph. Rain passed over the ridges, and thunder rolled through the valleys like low static, fading slowly until only dripping water remained. By October, the accumulation of these separate events forced the department to reclassify the 9 historical files from closed to active review. A composite task group formed quietly, drawn from communications, geology, and atmospheric science divisions. Their mandate was limited: determine whether recurring electromagnetic signals correlated with terrain factors. The group met in Denver and compiled all prior datasets. Frequency plots revealed the same repeating pattern appearing cyclically every 6 months, with each cycle aligning to opposite solstice points. The correlation reached 98% consistency. Field log entry at 15:52. Laboratory verification complete. Periodicity confirmed. Classification upgraded to cyclic anomaly type A. Breathing paragraph. Outside the facility, late autumn wind carried the dry scent of dust from the plains. The sky was pale and motionless above the mountains. The committee recommended installing permanent monitoring beacons along 3 reference sites: Olympic, Capitol Reef, and Great Smoky Mountains, to capture continuous readings. Authorization was granted without public notice. Equipment deployment began in November under the title Environmental Resonance Survey. Field summary concluded at 17:20 hours, daylight fading, signals normal, survey phase initiated. Installation of the Environmental Resonance Survey stations began on November 12, 2026. Each unit consisted of a compact data transmitter, a magnetic field sensor, and an audio recorder designed to monitor frequencies between 10 and 30 kHz. The instruments were camouflaged to blend with surrounding terrain and powered by low-output solar cells. Field log entry at 8:41 a.m. Temperature 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Overcast sky. Olympic Sector 1. Device calibration completed. The first beacon was placed near the Hoh River trailhead, less than a mile from the point where Thomas Eberle's radio had been recovered decades earlier. Technicians tested the sensor through multiple communication checks. Signal clarity remained perfect. For 48 hours, readings were steady. On the morning of November 15th, at precisely 7:22, the Olympic device recorded a sudden tone at 22 kHz, lasting exactly 22 seconds. The timing coincided with sunrise. The tone appeared simultaneously on 2 backup recorders, confirming the source was external to the instrument. Breathing paragraph. The forest at that hour was pale with mist, each branch dripping in measured rhythm, sound diffused through water-laden air. The Capitol Reef beacon activated 3 days later, positioned along the same sandstone basin once traversed by geologist Robert Hale. Initial data showed no anomalies, but on November 18th, during late afternoon, the device registered identical frequency and duration, 22 kHz for 22 seconds, amplitude lower, but waveform identical. Field log entry at 16:34, sky clear, wind calm, dual resonance recorded across regions, synchronized within margin of 1 second. The Great Smoky Mountains station went online November 20th, installed near the Chimney Tops Ridge. At 22 seconds past 7:41 p.m. Eastern Time, the same signal was captured again. The synchronization with the Olympic and Capitol Reef events formed the first verified tri-location correlation. Breathing paragraph. Night along the ridge was cloudless. Temperature dropped rapidly, and the radio towers glowed faint red against the darkness. All 3 recordings were transferred to the Denver Analysis Center. Spectral comparison showed no deviation in pitch or shape, though the delay between West and East Coast transmissions corresponded precisely with time zone difference. The conclusion listed the phenomenon as simultaneous environmental event observed nationally. No external transmitters were detected. Military and aviation agencies reported no activity. Satellite logs contained no entries matching those coordinates. Field log entry at 11:12, laboratory verification complete, correlation confirmed, cause undetermined. During December, monitoring continued without interruption. The next pulse arrived 29 days later, on December 14th, measured at the same frequency, but only half duration. The shorter signal occurred in reverse order: first Smoky Mountains, then Capitol Reef, then Olympic, each separated by the time equivalent of longitudinal distance. Breathing paragraph. Across the continent, winter clouds moved slowly. Snow fell without sound in one region, while desert air remained perfectly still in another. Following the event, several technicians reported brief auditory distortion inside the monitoring rooms, describing it as pressure change or muted resonance in the ears. Instrumentation detected no variation in atmospheric pressure. Field log entry at 10:45. Staff observation noted. Physiological readings normal. Anomaly not replicated. By late December, the combined data suggested a recurring pattern governed by both time and geography. The beacons were reclassified from temporary to indefinite installation. A dedicated file named Resonance Log 1 was opened. Its first entry marked multi-region synchronous transmission, no decay in amplitude, unknown source, breathing paragraph. On New Year's Eve, the stations transmitted silent data streams beneath the sound of winter wind. Snow accumulated on antennas, muting all external noise. With the onset of 2027, the department authorized continued passive monitoring only, citing absence of threat. The internal summary carried a single cautionary line: maintain observation protocol, avoid direct interference, or broadcast at detected frequencies. Field archive entry closed at 17:30 hours. Systems active, static low, background stable. The new year began without public awareness of the monitoring program. Field offices logged only routine maintenance, but the data stream from all 3 resonance stations remained under continuous review. For the first 6 weeks of 2027, readings stayed quiet. Then, on February 10th, each station registered an unscheduled activation. Field log entry at 7:19 a.m., Olympic Beacon 1, temperature 39 degrees Fahrenheit, sky overcast, signal onset recorded. The pulse differed from previous events. Instead of one continuous 22-second tone, 3 shorter bursts appeared, each separated by 5 seconds of silence. Capitol Reef and Great Smoky Mountains recorded identical patterns within the same minute. The synchronized timing removed all possibility of localized interference. Spectral analysis confirmed the same 22 kHz carrier frequency, but a faint modulation now appeared beneath the main tone, irregular and layered as if composed of multiple overlapping harmonics. The modulation did not repeat in subsequent signals. Breathing paragraph. The forest around the Olympic sensor was still. Light rain drifted through fog, dissolving into the soil without sound. Field log entry at 11:31, Capitol Reef unit. Clear sky, no wind. Tone repeated 3 cycles. Duration 72 seconds total. Afterward, the 3 beacons transmitted normally. Data analysts calculated the next expected cycle for mid-March. On March 15th, no tone appeared. The absence was as notable as the earlier presence. A notation in the log read, "Signal deviation, interval broken." For 12 weeks, the network stayed silent. Then, in early May, all 3 stations experienced simultaneous electrical resets. Battery levels showed full, no mechanical fault. Each device recorded a short internal timestamp error, a drift of exactly 22 seconds backward in system clock. Field log entry at 9:47 a.m. System synchronization failed. Internal clock offset detected. Manual reset required. The anomaly drew limited attention from the technical division, but reawakened discussion among field operators who remembered earlier cases. The pattern of 22 persisted through every layer of data: frequency, duration, and now time displacement. Breathing paragraph. Across the desert, the air held steady heat. Distant thunder sounded once, then stopped, leaving long silence under colorless sky. In June, Shenandoah District personnel noticed unusual interference on open emergency channels. The tone was faint, but recognizable to those familiar with previous recordings. It lasted 22 seconds, then faded. 2 minutes later, the Olympic beacon logged the same pattern, followed by Capitol Reef and the Smoky Mountains in successive order. The total span matched the length of a continental relay. Field log entry at 16:53, 4-station activation, delay sequence confirmed, amplitude constant, no environmental trigger identified. By this point, more than a decade of accumulated data across all 9 disappearance sites had been correlated to show identical magnetic deviation curves. Each curve aligned with the path of earlier anomalies, forming a continuous diagonal through the continental map. Breathing paragraph. Late summer air drifted along the valleys. At sunset, the light turned white, and the edges of ridges blurred until they appeared to move. In August, A helicopter inspection team flying over the Great Smoky Mountains reported seeing a bright reflection on a slope near the original down search area. The reflection appeared for 3 seconds, roughly circular, then vanished. Ground Patrol dispatched later found nothing at those coordinates. Field log entry at 1436. Weather clear, visibility full, reflective flash observed. No physical source located. The 3 beacons continued to register intermittent tones through the rest of the month, always brief, always precise. The Denver Analysis Center compiled a cumulative report titled Resonance Sequence Continuity, marking the first official acknowledgement of repeated synchronized events across the United States park system. The report concluded with a statement of procedure. No correlation established between resonance events and missing person cases. Continue passive monitoring. Restrict field speculation. Breathing paragraph. Low. Autumn 2027 began without weather extremes. The resonance stations transmitted steady background data through September, their readouts uniform. Analysts noted no interference until the morning of October 3rd, when the Capitol Reef beacon failed to report its hourly signal. Maintenance staff reached the site 2 days later and found the antenna bent at a right angle, its housing half buried in sand as though pressed downward evenly. No animal or vehicle tracks surrounded it. Field log entry at 9:48 a.m. Temperature 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Sky clear. Equipment damaged. Cause unverified. The unit's internal storage contained one final entry. At 0642 on October 3rd, a tone identical to prior events had begun, but stopped abruptly at 17 seconds. Then the recorder captured 3 seconds of silence, followed by a short burst of sound at a lower pitch, 19 kilohertz, before power cut off completely. Breathing paragraph. Morning light glinted on the metal casing. The desert was quiet, only dry wind whispering along the canyon rim. The device was replaced the same week. The new installation registered no anomaly. Yet within days, the Olympic and Smoky Mountain beacons began recording faint background pulses of the same 19 kilohertz frequency, repeating every 12 hours without variation. Field log entry at 11:15. Cross-regional pattern established. Lower frequency sustained. Amplitude minimal. Audio engineers verified the tones were genuine, not mechanical artifact. The pulses continued for 7 days, then ceased as abruptly as they had begun. At the same time, a ranger team in Pisgah Forest reported that several metal tools stored in a maintenance shed had magnetized overnight. Compass readings inside the structure drifted several degrees east, returning to normal by morning. Breathing paragraph. The ridge that night was windless, air heavy and unmoving, every sound muffled. By mid-October, all 3 monitoring stations resumed normal operation, though analysts recorded a slow oscillation in ambient magnetic field strength. The shift repeated on a 22-day cycle, peaking and receding with mathematical precision. Field log entry at 10:26, oscillation verified, correspondence with prior temporal intervals confirmed, cause undetermined. During the same week, hikers in Shenandoah submitted photographs to park headquarters showing faint concentric discolorations in a meadow. Rings of pale grass visible only under morning dew. Measurements from the images placed their radius near 30 meters. By afternoon, the pattern vanished. The photographs were entered into the correlation archive as visual anomaly, record 3. Breathing paragraph. The field lay silent after sunrise. Mist drifted upward until the surface appeared flat and featureless again. In November, the Denver Analysis team observed that the lower frequency tone detected earlier matched precisely one harmonic division of the standard 22 kilohertz signal. This suggested a physical relationship between events rather than random interference. The memo documenting this relationship concluded with a single observation. Signal decay demonstrates ordered reduction, possibly cyclical reset. Field log entry at 1542. Laboratory verification complete. Correlation probable. Interpretation withheld. As winter approached, technicians upgraded sensors to capture both acoustic and magnetic data concurrently. The three stations reported synchronized calibration within 1/10 of a second. The system entered standby mode for the cold months. Breathing paragraph. Across the country, temperature dropped. Rivers froze along their edges, and the wind carried dry static through leafless branches. By December 15th, with snow falling over the Olympic range, all stations recorded simultaneous silence. No atmospheric noise, no electromagnetic drift for a full 22 minutes. The complete absence of measurable variation was itself unprecedented. Field log entry at 7:31 a.m. Total signal absence detected. Duration 22 minutes, baseline flat, instruments functioning normally. At the end of the recording, the systems resumed standard data flow as if nothing had occurred. The archive listed the event as extended null state. Breathing paragraph. The silence of that morning seemed to expand across every frequency. Even the river below the trees appeared motionless. Field archive closure recorded at 17:25 hours. Barometer stable, no residual static. Resonance phase dormant. January 2028 opened with heavy fog across the Pacific coast. The Olympic beacon transmitted normal baseline readings for 12 days. Then, on January 13th, its motion sensor detected vibration lasting less than 1 second. The amplitude was low, similar to footsteps nearby, but there were no patrols scheduled in that zone. The nearest ranger station confirmed all personnel accounted for. Field log entry at 0754, temperature 39 degrees Fahrenheit, visibility poor, vibration detected, no visual confirmation. 3 minutes later, the beacon recorded a sudden increase in electromagnetic field strength, followed by a 22 kHz pulse, lasting exactly 22 seconds. Capitol Reef and Great Smoky Mountains registered identical pulses at their local times, each beginning precisely at sunrise. Breathing paragraph. The forest was white with fog. No birds called, no water moved, only condensation dripping from branches in steady rhythm. The timing matched the pattern first observed 2 years earlier, suggesting a full recurrence of the solstice-aligned cycle. Analysts logged the event as Resonance Activation 1, Phase 2. The signal shape remained unchanged, pure sine wave, no distortion. At mid-morning, a secondary anomaly occurred at the Capitol Reef site. Cameras monitoring the sensor captured a brief flicker of light across the sandstone surface, visible for 2 frames only, originating from ground level. When the frames were enhanced, the light appeared as a narrow vertical band, uniform and pale. Field log entry at 10:37, sky clear, no reflection sources present. Visual event duration less than 1/10 second. Breathing paragraph. The desert held steady heat. The air shimmered faintly above the rocks, yet no sound reached the observers standing near the equipment. The following day, maintenance at the Smoky Mountain station found the data cable leading from the power cell unlatched, though the locking mechanism showed no breakage. A fine dust coated the connectors, despite protective housing. The cable was reseated, and the system resumed normal function. Over the next month, all stations remained active. No further anomalies appeared until February 24th, when a single high-frequency tone, slightly above 22 kHz, was recorded for 10 seconds, followed by a mirror tone below 19 kHz. This paired signal occurred simultaneously across all 3 sensors. Field log entry at 9:24, paired resonance event detected. Total duration 20 seconds. Amplitudes equal. Phase opposition confirmed. Audio specialists compared the waveforms and noted that when overlaid, the 2 tones canceled each other entirely, producing silence identical to the extended null state observed the previous December. Breathing paragraph. Inside the analysis lab, monitors showed flat lines. The absence of movement on the graph resembled a still photograph of the ocean before a storm. At the end of February, a separate and unexpected report arrived from Shenandoah. Two maintenance rangers hiking along the Rapidan River heard what they described as faint mechanical hum emanating from below the ground near an old floodplain. The noise persisted for approximately 20 seconds, then stopped. Their radios lost reception during the sound and returned to normal immediately afterward. Field log entry at 1432, air temperature 51 degrees Fahrenheit, sky overcast, subterranean vibration reported, cause unknown. No instruments detected tremor or seismic movement. Geological sensors at nearby stations showed flat lines. The rangers returned to the site the next day. There was no sound, only small circular depressions in soft soil where moisture had condensed evenly. Breathing paragraph. The forest smelled of wet leaves. The air seemed dense, each breath carrying the same muted pressure as during an approaching storm. Within the next week, both Olympic and Capitol Reef sites registered brief signal absences, followed by normal operation. These interruptions occurred exactly 22 days after the initial January pulse, matching the established interval. Field log entry at 1740, interval recurrence confirmed, synchronization complete, frequency stable. By early March, the combined evidence indicated the system had entered a repeating cycle. Reports from all stations were collated into Resonance File 2. The final line of its summary stated, "Phenomenon persists in ordered pattern, amplitude unchanged, environmental impact negligible, continuation expected." Breathing paragraph. Snow melted from tree limbs along the valleys. The light returned weakly, gray and even, carrying no shadow. Field archive entry concluded at 18:15 hours, static minimal, barometer steady, network fully operational. March 2028 closed quietly. For nearly 4 weeks, the resonance network transmitted stable signals, showing no irregularities. Then, on April 6th, the Olympic station recorded a sharp distortion at 19 kHz that lasted 7 seconds, followed by 3 seconds of silence. Then the familiar 22 kHz tone. The pattern repeated twice before returning to baseline. Field log entry at 7:18 a.m. Temperature 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Fog moderate, compound signal recorded. Duration 20 seconds total. At the same time, Capitol Reef and Great Smoky Mountain stations captured only the 22 kHz portion. The absence of the lower frequency in those two sites led technicians to conclude that the Olympic event was local, not system-wide. However, satellite atmospheric readings showed no lightning or radio interference in the region. Breathing paragraph. The valley filled with gray mist. Light diffused evenly across water and moss, blending sound and distance into a single plane. 3 days later, hikers in the same sector reported hearing a faint ringing in the air similar to a tuning fork, audible for less than half a minute, direction indeterminate. No beacon tones were active at that time. Their watches stopped for several seconds during the sound, then resumed without losing overall time. Field log entry at 10:22 a.m. Witness report verified. Magnetic variance negligible. Timepiece anomaly noted. Meanwhile, technicians at the Capitol Reef monitoring site reported changes in soil conductivity around the sensor. Baseline reading of 200 microsiemens per meter rose steadily to 350 before returning to normal by evening. No rainfall or mineral contamination occurred. The shift lasted exactly 22 minutes. Breathing paragraph. The desert air trembled with heat, and small grains of sand lifted from the surface, though wind speed remained 0. By mid-April, analysts from the Denver Center noticed that the spacing between pulses had shortened slightly, from 22 days to 21 days and 20 hours. The change was too small for error, yet consistent across all 3 beacons. A memo described it as incremental contraction of cycle period, origin undetermined. Field log entry at 1637, cross-regional synchronization maintained, periodicity shift measurable, further observation required. At Shenandoah, vegetation teams performing spring surveys noted partial regrowth failure in the same meadow. where discoloration had appeared months earlier. The shape re-emerged faintly in the grass, pale rings visible under low light. Samples taken at dawn showed higher magnetite content than surrounding soil. Breathing paragraph. Early sun reached the field through low mist, giving the grass a dull metallic sheen. Across the country, each station continued to function without human interference. On April 28th, all three recorded identical double tones. First 19 kHz for 10 seconds, then 22 kHz for 10 seconds, separated by 2 seconds of silence. For the first time, the amplitude rose slightly above baseline. Field log entry at 9:11 a.m. Simultaneous dual resonance detected. Strength increase 6%. Systems intact. Within 30 minutes of the event, a temperature drop of 4 degrees occurred at each location, followed by gradual normalization. Sensors detected no wind or cloud cover to account for the cooling. Breathing paragraph. The forests and deserts held still. Air felt thick, yet carried no sound except slow dripping water and distant echoes of wind. Data compiled during this period formed Resonance File 3. Its summary opened with the following line: amplitude increasing at constant rate. Cycle contraction continues. The tone of the document remained procedural but cautious. By early May, the department extended monitoring authority for another year and installed 2 auxiliary sensors along the diagonal path between existing stations. The new beacons were smaller, placed in remote Midwestern grassland to confirm whether the frequency traversed continental distance. Both came online on May 10th. Field log entry at 8:40. Overcast, mild wind. Installation complete. Initial readings clear. Breathing paragraph. In the plains that morning, nothing moved except grass bending in slow, uniform waves. The horizon was featureless, the sound minimal. For 10 days, no signals were detected. Then, at dawn on May 21st, all 5 stations, including the new Midwestern units, registered a single perfect pulse of 22 kHz for exactly 22 seconds, amplitude identical across the network. Field archive notation closed at 1720. Event logged as full system synchronization. Status active. Monitoring continuous. June 2028 began with long, stable weather across most of the United States. For 3 weeks, every beacon in the resonance network transmitted regular environmental data without interference. Then, on June 23rd, a coordinated signal occurred unlike any previous pattern. At exactly 6:41 a.m. Pacific Time, all 5 monitoring stations recorded a tone at 22 kHz that sustained for 22 seconds. When the tone ended, a lower harmonic emerged at 19 kHz, lasting an additional 11 seconds. After both tones ceased, every station's sensors logged a brief pressure variation equivalent to 1.2 millibars. The change dissipated instantly, leaving no measurable aftereffect. Field log entry at 6:41 a.m. Temperature 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Sky clear. Synchronized dual resonance. Pressure anomaly recorded. Breathing paragraph. The forest at Olympic remained perfectly still. Light filtered through fir branches like liquid silver, carrying no warmth. At the same hour, Capitol Reef's desert floor vibrated faintly. The seismic sensors, though not sensitive enough to detect low tremor, captured a single spike in ground acceleration, too brief for natural classification. By 10 a.m., the Denver analysis team confirmed identical readings across the entire network. The coincidence in both time and amplitude established the event as deliberate, though the source remained untraceable. A memo circulated internally titled Resonance Convergence Event 1. It contained no speculation, only the observation. System-wide simultaneous pulse achieved. Unknown initiating mechanism. Field log entry at 11:27. Barometric pressure normalized. Communication uninterrupted. System stable. On June 24th, during follow-up diagnostics, the Olympic beacon transmitted a short data burst without command input. The file labeled itself Record A22. Its contents were binary code, translating into numerical coordinates. When plotted, the location fell within a section of forest 500 yards east of Eberle's last known position. Breathing paragraph. Fog covered the valley floor. The air smelled of cedar and rain, the sound of running water faint behind the trees. A ranger team visited the coordinates the next morning. They found disturbed ground near an uprooted log, as though something heavy had been placed and removed recently. Beneath the soil lay a small metallic tag engraved with a sequence of numbers identical to the file label A22. The tag measured 2 inches long, unoxidized, temperature cooler than surrounding Earth. Field log entry at 9:16 a.m. Object recovered at transmitted coordinates. Condition pristine. Origin unverified. The tag was delivered to Denver. Metallurgical analysis identified composition as standard aluminum alloy with trace elements not matching local ore. No manufacturer markings were present. Simultaneously, one of the new Midwestern sensors reported a temporary communication blackout, lasting 22 minutes. Upon reboot, its internal clock showed a time drift forward by 22 seconds. Engineers verified that firmware could not produce such offset. Breathing paragraph. Across the plains that evening, thunderheads formed in silence, lightning flickering within without sound reaching the ground. Field log entry at 16:42, clock drift confirmed. Correction manual, anomaly reproducible, none. Over the next 10 days, minor events occurred at irregular intervals. The Capitol Reef sensor recorded faint background hums, detectable only under magnification. The Smoky Mountains beacon experienced a 1-degree internal temperature increase during each resonance pulse. The system remained functional, but technicians noted a growing uniformity among signals. No variance, no interference, as though broadcast from a single synchronized origin. By July 5th, analysis indicated all 5 stations had entered identical phase alignment, each transmitting and receiving within the same microsecond window. Natural atmospheric propagation could not account for the precision. Breathing paragraph. Across every region, day length reached its yearly maximum, and sound seemed to carry farther than usual, spreading thin through hot air. A concluding entry in the monthly report summarized the condition. Network synchronization complete. Operational stability absolute. Emission source external to recorded parameters. Continue observation until deviation. Field archive closed at 17:21 hours. Temperature steady. Humidity moderate. Static absent. System nominal. Late July 2028 brought a stillness that many field officers later described as physical rather than auditory. Across the monitoring network, background noise dropped to levels below sensor detection. The oscillations of wind, insects, and water all declined simultaneously. Weather conditions remained normal, yet the soundscape flattened to near silence. Field log entry at 8:13 a.m. Olympic Sector 1. Temperature 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Pressure stable. Ambient sound 0 decibels and sensor error. For 5 consecutive days, the readings stayed motionless. On July 30th, at precisely noon, coordinated numbers appeared. All 5 resonance stations activated together without resistance. The resulting tone lasted 22 seconds, followed by a complete loss of the 22 minutes. During that minute, each beacon's clock ceased counting, frozen mid-second, before resuming spontaneously at identical moment. Breathing paragraph. Across forest, desert, and plain, light appeared thin and metallic. Air shimmered slightly as though seen through heat, though temperature remained unchanged. At the end of the null period, sensors registered a single data spike. Temperature drop of 2 degrees. Magnetic variation upward by 1%. No field personnel reported seismic motion or wind change. Animals within recorded perimeters displayed temporary absence from camera feeds. Field log entry at 12:23. Synchronized system pause verified. Resumption automatic. All recordings intact. Wildlife motion negative for 20 minutes. The Denver Analysis Center compiled the event under designation Convergence Phase 2. Engineers confirmed that each clock interruption had occurred to the millisecond, suggesting a coordinated external trigger. The report used the phrase, artificial synchrony. No hypothesis followed. Breathing paragraph. In laboratory corridors, the fluorescent lights hummed faintly, the only sound against the steady ticking of cooling fans. On August 3rd, a maintenance ranger near Capitol Reef visited the coordinates transmitted by the previous A22 file for verification. He found the ground undisturbed, yet his radio began emitting low static at the moment he stepped within the marked radius. The static faded as he withdrew, returning precisely when he crossed back in. Measurements indicated a boundary circle 30 meters wide. Field log entry at 11:17, temperature 91 degrees Fahrenheit, wind calm, local field boundary detected, repeatable phenomenon confirmed. No electromagnetic equipment or buried metallic structures were located in the area. The ranger marked the perimeter with small wooden stakes and departed. Within 24 hours, a drone survey photographed faint discoloration forming at the same site, a pale ring visible only under angled light. Breathing paragraph. The sun burned low over the canyon. Dust moved across the plain in small spirals that vanished before touching the rock. Simultaneously, the Midwestern sensors began recording a background hum of 19 kilohertz amplitude, low but constant. The tone persisted for 6 days before diminishing gradually into silence. The log entry from August 10th recorded, continuous low resonance maintained. Decay smooth, termination without interference. Throughout August, the same magnetic variations recurred every 22 days. Each pulse was accompanied by subtle light fluctuations captured on time-lapse cameras, shifts in luminance that registered but were invisible to the naked eye. Field log entry at 10:48 a.m. All stations synchronized. Luminance fluctuation measured 0.06 lux. Duration consistent with resonance cycle. Breathing paragraph. Under cloudless sky, the landscape seemed momentarily brighter, edges sharpening as if under invisible flash, then returning to shade. The cumulative report for late August summarized events as system-wide harmonic stabilization. It included a final advisory instructing all field units to avoid physical interference with beacon structures and to refrain from using personal radios during predicted activation windows. By September 1st, all stations returned to baseline silence. Data analysts noted perfect uniformity across every variable. The monthly file ended with one line, written by an unnamed technician. Silence holds steady. Await next cycle. Field archive closure recorded at 17:19 hours. Barometer steady. Static absent. Communications nominal. Operational phase ongoing. September 2028 unfolded with measured regularity. The resonance network continued to report stable conditions, yet technicians described an atmosphere of tension, as though waiting for an event already scheduled. Every forecast pointed toward a new activation window, expected around the autumn equinox. Field log entry at 9:10 a.m. Temperature 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity high. Operation steady. Systems nominal. On September 21st, 24 hours before the equinox, Olympic, Capitol Reef, and Great Smoky Mountain stations all entered standby mode without command input. Their transmission indicators glowed solid green, meaning active but silent. The auxiliary sensors in the Midwestern plains remained responsive. Then, at exactly 11:22 p.m., Coordinated Universal Time on the 22nd, the entire network initiated full-spectrum recording on its own. The signal that followed began as the standard 22 kHz tone, but shifted gradually downward to 19 kHz, then upward beyond 30. The full sweep lasted 22 seconds before ending in silence that extended beyond the expected interval. The duration of stillness measured 22 minutes and 22 seconds. Breathing paragraph. Across the forest and desert, the air thickened, light pale and colorless. Even flowing water seemed to slow, as though restrained. When sound returned, it was not a tone, but a vibration recorded across all channels simultaneously. An inaudible resonance registered in seismic, magnetic, and audio data alike. Instruments captured identical phase alignment across the continent. The vibration persisted exactly 1 minute, then ceased. Field log entry at 2346. Unified resonance event detected. Amplitude uniform. Frequency indeterminate. Termination simultaneous across sites. At the Olympic Station, cameras showed faint mist rising from the soil near the beacon housing. The vapor dispersed within seconds, leaving the surrounding vegetation untouched. Capitol Reef sensors measured brief ground temperature decrease of 5 degrees, while the Smoky Mountains beacon registered mild ionization in air samples. None of the stations lost power or clock synchronization. Breathing paragraph. The following morning dawned gray and soundless. Wind remained absent, even at high ridges. Data transmitted to Denver filled more than 100 gigabytes, yet spectral graphs displayed uniform lines, flat and silent except for the single 1-minute vibration. Analysts described the trace as mathematically perfect. The shape repeated across all instruments as if copied. Field log entry at 10:28. Laboratory verification completed. Anomalies identical. Replication confirmed. Environmental damage, none. A memo circulated through the department under heading Convergence Phase 3. It summarized the event as continent-wide resonance synchronization without external transmission detected. The report closed with one instruction: maintain passive observation, defer interpretation. Breathing paragraph. In offices and ranger cabins alike, personnel reported similar auditory impressions during the event. A low pressure in the ears, not sound, but sensation. It passed quickly, leaving faint dizziness behind. On October 1st, a routine maintenance check at the Olympic Beacon discovered new surface markings on the steel base. The markings formed shallow concentric arcs, similar to growth rings. Metal composition tests found no corrosion or etching tool traces. The lines appeared embedded beneath the protective coating, depth uniform at fractions of a millimeter. Field log entry at 8:47 a.m. Air temperature 49 degrees Fahrenheit. Sky clear. Structural anomaly observed. Cause unknown. The same markings later appeared on both Capitol Reef and Smoky Mountains units within 48 hours. Each pattern measured identical radius and spacing. Breathing paragraph. Evening fog covered the sensors, and the ringed metal shone faintly under light from equipment indicators. The monthly summary concluded that all evidence pointed to self-induced structural alteration caused by unknown interaction between sound and magnetic field. It carried no recommendation for repair or removal, only for preservation. The document closed with this notation: resonance system stable, material response continues, parameters unchanged. Field archive entry finalized at 17:18 hours. Static minimal, communications clear, wind calm, visual silence complete. October closed with unbroken calm. Across the 5 monitoring sites, ambient readings remained at 0 deviation. The resonance network entered a prolonged phase of silence that analysts labeled static absence, state. No tones, pulses, or magnetic drifts appeared for 31 consecutive days. Field log entry at 9:21 a.m. Temperature 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Weather stable. No electromagnetic variance detected. Systems nominal. At mid-month, a review team visited the Olympic Station for hardware inspection. The beacon stood intact, ring patterns unchanged, surrounding ground undisturbed. A thin film of frost covered the metal housing so air temperature remained above freezing. When brushed away, the frost reformed within minutes, shape following the same circular design as the etched lines beneath. Breathing paragraph. Morning air hung still among the cedar trees. No movement, no sound of water or birds. Similar observations were made at the other primary stations. Capitol Reef's beacon emitted a faint mechanical vibration perceptible through touch, but inaudible. The Smoky Mountains device showed mild luminescence along the lower panel edges during night hours, fading by dawn. All systems continued to function normally. Field log entry at 22:32. Ambient light 1 lux above baseline. Energy consumption steady. Anomaly non-fatal. By early November, analysts concluded the network had entered equilibrium. A condition described as total harmonic stabilization. Frequency patterns remained flat. Instruments recorded only the natural noise of wind and insects once again. On November 17th, however, the Denver Analysis Center received a final unexpected transmission. It originated simultaneously from all 5 stations and lasted less than 1 second. The message contained no tone, but a binary data string, translating into a short sequence of words. End record 22. Field log entry at 0947. Data packet received. Checksum valid. Content minimal. Source internal verified. The message could not be traced to any human operator. System access logs showed no command or scheduled routine corresponding to it. Afterward, all devices continued transmitting baseline information, but never repeated the phrase, breathing paragraph. Across the network, days shortened, snow formed on ridges, and the air thickened with cold moisture. In December, a joint memorandum recommended deactivation of experimental methods for winter maintenance. The order was signed by directors of all relevant agencies. Equipment removal began December 20th. By the 24th, each site was powered down, antennas dismantled, and sensors sealed. The last signal received registered background static and a brief spike at 22 kHz, lasting less than a single second. Barely measurable, yet identical to the earliest event on record. Field log entry at 16:10 hours. Shutdown complete. Final pulse logged. Project concluded. Breathing paragraph. Evening settled over the valleys. Wind moved softly through branches, carrying the sound of running water again. In January 2029, the consolidated archive known as Resonance Log closed with total length exceeding 6,000 pages. Each page contained procedural data, coordinates, and field notes, none offering explanation. The closing summary consisted of 1 paragraph only. Between 1996 and 2028, multiple environmental resonance events were documented across national park territories. Origin and intent remain undetermined. Observations confirm synchronization between geographic regions under unknown control parameters. Investigation suspended pending further evidence. Breathing paragraph. Snow continued to fall over the high forests and open plains. Streams froze, then thawed, and silence returned to its natural rhythm. Field archive closure recorded at 17:30 hours. Barometer steady, signal absent. All transmissions ended. Silence complete.